Hi, my name's Neville Ansley, and I've titled this audio "The Right Vote." How does one make the right vote? Not voting for the right, not voting for the left. I'm unaffiliated. I'm not a member of the GOP, and I'm not a member of the DFL or Libertarian or any political party. I'm completely unaffiliated. My biggest I am or would like to be a Christian. I'm working very hard at attaining the recognition as a Christian. So this audio is really aimed at my fellow believers. But if you're not a Christian or you have no Christian aspirations, if you happen to be a member of another religious organization, that's fine. Listen in. You may get something from this. Voting in America is very different to voting in a parliamentary system. In a parliamentary system, you elect the party. The party elect the people who represent them. You don't have that direct influence. Whereas the primaries that are run here are the GOP, DFL, and all the primaries that can run offer their members, GOP membership or DFL membership, to make a choice. They want them to choose the person they're going to vote for in the national elections. So the representatives of the party are elected by the party, not by the party leadership. It's very different. It's very different. And as a republic, the Electoral College is essential to legalizing the outcome of an election. Most Americans don't understand the functions of the Electoral College, and I'm sure most people outside the country are absolutely clueless as to the workings, the functions of the Electoral College. This is not the time to discuss that. So I'm not even going to get into it. I don't think I'd even do a very good job of explaining it to you, other than the fact that America is not a democracy. It is a republic based on a democratic election, but it's a republic. The difference between democracies and republics is that in a republic, the rule of law applies, whereas in a democracy, the majority rule. And so the Electoral College helps to level that field so that there is no majority rule, but an electoral rule. Enough of that. That doesn't help you make the right choice. How do we get to making the right choice? Well, about 10 years ago, I became an American citizen. And as an American citizen, I felt an obligation to at least turn up at the voting booth and make my voice heard, or at least try and make it heard. The problem with that is, how do you know which party you're going to elect? Which person who represents that party are you going to elect? And if you can get beyond all the sewage that comes out post-election and get down to a real bedrock of what is important to you as a voter. I've asked people sometimes, hey, do you know the difference between a Democrat and a Republican? And they are clueless, as I was. I remember the first time I voted, I went in there and I opened the ballot because I didn't even know what it was going to look like. The last time I voted was 1994 in South Africa in those elections, and if you looked at the ballot, there were so many party options there. You had to vote for the party. You didn't vote for the individual who was standing for that party. And so it was rather confusing for me to decide how and who am I going to vote for. Subsequently, I've got down to bedrock. What is most important to me? So when people ask me, I say, look, you will never find a politician or a person standing for election who's going to agree with you on every single point that you find important. If you want that person, look in the mirror. And if you can't go and stand for election because you don't want to be a part of the political party or you don't want to be in politics, then you need a list. You need to compile a list of what's important to you. What I did, and it's not a written down list. It's it's a mentalist, what I'd looked at is what was the most important thing for me in a politician. What would I like to see in the person I elect? What's so important to me that if there was no one representing that particular point, I would not vote? So I had to base my number one as a non-negotiable. If you've ever received a non-negotiable check, you know what that means. It's not open for negotiation. It's not even open for maybe if, but, when, or any other option. I had to get to that point. And then after that, number 2, number 3, number 4, excuse the cuckoo in the background, but it's letting me know time's running out. So I had to sit down and say, well, what is important to me? And I made a list of it. But now my non-negotiable is this important. If everybody on that, if every member standing for election in my district had my number one, then I'd have to go to number 2. Number 2 would be somewhat negotiable, but important enough for me to make a vote on. Then if they all had number 2, then I'd have to go to number 3, and then I'd have to go to number 4, and so on. But my number 1 is non-negotiable. So the converse applies too. If everybody standing for election, none of them had my number 1, it is the only time I refuse to vote. It's the only time I feel justified in not voting. And that's how important my number 1 is. So how did I get to my number 1? In 98, I think it was 98, I was listening to a talk show on one of the radio shows, and an interesting thing came out there as I tuned in. I just tuned in. A recording, I can't even remember the show. I think it was Dennis Prager or one of those talk show hosts. But as I tuned into the show, there was a question posed on the floor of the Senate. I don't know who the questioner was, but I know to whom the question was directed. And it was the senator from California, Dianne Feinstein. She was asked to please describe the procedure used in partial birth abortion. I had never heard the term. When you put partial on its own, you understand what partial is. When you put birth on its own, you understand what birth is. And if you put abortion on its own, you understand what abortion is. But when you string those 3 words together, partial birth abortion, it does not generate a mental image. It is just an empty statement, and most people don't think further than, I don't understand what that means. So, well, when the senator refused to answer that particular question, I was intrigued. What the heck could partial birth abortion be? So I went out of my way to listen up for any discussion on it, any article on it. So let me explain to you what the procedure is, or what I believe it is, on what I've uncovered. In the late 3rd trimester, around about between the 8th and 9th month, the baby is partially birthed, in other words, breech birthed. And before the head comes out of the vaginal passage and the baby can breathe, a sharp instrument is inserted in the back of the head of the baby, and its brains are drained. That's the word. That's what the word means. Partial birth, partly born, and then slaughtered before it can be protected by the Constitution by taking a breath of air. That is my number 1. I am not pro-choice. I am not pro-life. I am anti-abortion. If I do not vote against this procedure, my hands are covered in the blood of innocent kids. I have been asked, so is there any time that abortion would be justified? There's no MD after my name. If you need an answer to that question, I suggest you find a gynecologist and ask them. Could there be? I have no idea. It's not even an area I want to get into discussion with, because I'm unqualified to make that decision. Partial birth abortion is so barbaric. It is the sacrifice of the unborn to the selfish needs of a society that has become godless. I'm sorry, I get kind of passionate about this. I've tried to have this discussion and everybody poo-poos and don't talk that, it's politics and that. No, this is the human life. This is a human life. This is a creation of God. And as a follower of the Christian teachings, of the teachings of Christ, I have to vote against it. And the only way I can vote against it is to vote for the people who are opposed to the procedure. If there are people standing for election in your area that are opposed to this procedure and you don't vote for them, the blood of the innocent is on your hands. And you will not escape it. When David's illegitimate child to Bathsheba was due to be born, Nathan the prophet informed him that the child would not survive. Because of his sin, that child would be born but not survive. David mourned deeply and repented deeply of what had happened. When the child died, David washed his face, sat down to a meal, and when questioned about this complete 180-degree change, David said, "He cannot come to me, but I can go to him." That tells me that all children survive in the next world. They all survive. Are you ready to face those children and give an answer to why you did not oppose this procedure, why you denied them life? I'm not. There's no blood on these hands. I vote against it, and I vote against it every time. It's my non-negotiable. No, I don't vote. Okay, that's fine. You don't vote. Then by not voting against it, you condone it. You are agreeing to it. You are signing the death warrant of the unborn children by simply not getting into a voting booth and voting against it. Yeah, I'm not going to be popular. I'm not here to win popularity straights. I'm not here to save the child's life. Only I'm here to save the souls of the people who do support it. You need to understand this. We incarcerate people in this world for crime. We incarcerate them. We'll put them in a hole for the rest of their lives if the crime is severe enough. And in actual fact, if it's really severe, we'll deprive them of their life. If they are guilty. You don't think that there's a heaven and a hell? That's fine. You can think that. But let me tell you something. If it's true and you have banked on not being true, you've lost everything. You're going to a really dark place. I don't want to go into heaven and hell. I'm not going to try and persuade you or scare you into changing your mind or your vote. I'm just saying that the blood of the innocent is on your hands if you don't oppose this. The right vote is to vote against abortion. I can't vote against just partial birth abortion. I have to vote against the whole thing. Look, if you open the door to Satan, if you just crack the door to Satan, he will walk through that door and you will never stop him. And we have evidence of it. Human tissues and human organs being sold by abortion clinics. Proof. Hard proof. We have a doctor sitting in jail right now for the horror of what he did to those children. born alive and had their spinal cord snipped. That's the kind of horror that comes through those doors. So if you're not prepared to close those doors because you're too lazy to get into a voting review, to register to vote, and to choose, I don't care if the person's a Democrat, a Libertarian, or a Republican, all I care is that they don't stand for and support this horror, this abomination called partial birth abortion. I hope and pray that this message comes through to you. And if you're not a voter and you should be voting, get out there and vote. I don't care about the rest of my list is number 1, non-negotiable abortion. Thereafter, I'm amenable. I will judge it as it comes. I'm not anti-democrat. I'm not anti-libertarian. I'm not anti or pro any of them. I just vote against abortion. And if the abortion is not on the ballot, well, then I won't vote. It's not that important. I don't care who sits in the council. I don't care who sits in the school boards. Well, I do. I'll vote my heart in it, but it doesn't matter, but I will not miss an election where the future of the unborn child is at stake. Look, a premature birth at 8 months, there's a really good chance that that baby is going to survive. And yet, this country has killed over 70 million babies. There is an accountability coming, and it's coming in the form that it came against the children of Israel. The earth will rebel against us and cast us off. I just pray that you hear this message and vote against this abomination. America, you can't avoid not to be involved in this. You can't afford not to be involved in this. If you don't vote and you have the right to vote, your hands are covered in the blood of innocent children. I ask you, get out there and vote. Vote against this abomination, and at least sleep with a clear conscience. May the Lord be with you. Amen.